how to become awesome at playing Wakfu. Let's start with, let's make a group for a dungeon. The first thing you're going to want to decide is what you want to do, and if possible, make a unanimous decision. If it's possible, try to know what you need to complete the dungeon successfully. This might be tactics, classes, a certain amount of team damage, etc. I would suggest making a group leader. You can do this many different ways, but it might make more sense for whoever has run the dungeon the most to be the leader, or the person who wants to run the dungeon and the person organising the run. So, with an understanding of what makes a successful run, try to recruit people who will help you. For example, in Ankama, it's bad for fire characters, but it's better to take a full team at the very minimum to spread the damage out. So, with the understanding of what you need to make a successful team, tell the people in your group what players you need. You need overpowered damage dealers, you need long, short range damage dealers. Okay, when people join the group, ask people, have they done the dungeon before? For example, in Dark Hell, it has a chest, and if you open the chest, it screws the run up unless you're going for the achievement. So people need to know about things like that. Remember, if someone hasn't done the dungeon before, they might not have the zaps, and they might not know where to go. The Rictus Elite dungeon is at the bottom of a mine. You really need to show people how on earth to get there, instead of just shouting, hurry up, and oh, I did that easy. Okay, when people join, ask people, do they have enough time to do the dungeon? Is it 4 AM for them? Because personally, I don't like it when people log out in the middle of a dungeon. It's just poor organisation and it's poor planning on both sides. Because sometimes it could actually ruin the whole run. Okay, people need to make it clear if they need to do anything in real life. It's usually better that we sort all our real life stuff out and then come back and run the dungeon. For example, if you need to go to the toilet, have a smoke, make something to eat. If everyone does this at the same time, then no time is wasted. Because what happens is usually you get one person who sits around waiting for half an hour because everyone's doing stuff at different times. So it just takes forever. If anyone, when people join your group, if anyone needs a key, tell them that you've got tons of keys. And you can either sell them a key, or if you're Jerry DB, you just give them a key for nothing. Now, if you're the person who wants to run the dungeon, make sure you have tons of keys. Even if you only want to do one run, make sure you've got at least 12 keys. Now, you can do this for a few reasons. Just in case of a disconnection, you could give everyone 2 keys, or you can just give everyone 1 key and then run outside the dungeon and then give them a key if they need it. I cannot stress this enough. You must have more keys than is needed. Just because there's no time farming keys, there's no time being wasted. You're recruiting people for a dungeon run. You're not recruiting people for a key farming session and then run the dungeon. I once done this a few months ago, and farming the keys took us like an hour, and people disconnected in the dungeon. And then we needed more keys farmed, and it just took forever. Waste of time. Okay, have a clear understanding within the group how you're going to divide the drops up. This is the reason I tend not to invite random unknown people, because they might not follow the agreement. You always have the noob who gets the drop and he refuses to sell the drop to you at less than full market price, which is massively unfair because you didn't even need the noob, and you haven't got the camas to buy it at full market value. That's why you're running the dungeon. Okay, in my book, people don't count as ready unless they're standing outside the dungeon. Not fighting, not doing some leveling, not doing a bit of crafting or anything. They have to be stood outside the dungeon, or at the minimum outside the dungeon in their haven bag, because then at least they're there. Okay, and the person who's got the most keys must go in the dungeon last, and make sure everyone is in the dungeon. Even ask people in the dungeon, is everyone in? And when people do have a key, they should just go straight in. There's no point standing outside. Also, I'd suggest having lots of Kenko just in case people do die. Okay, now this is another massive thing. Never invite someone and then replace them with someone who is much stronger. So if you had a level 100 IOP and then a level 130 IOP who's fully geared up, don't say to the level 100 IOP, to be honest, you're trash. I don't need you. I've got someone better. It's just disgraceful. You just shouldn't do it. It's just ignorant. So just don't replace people. And you should know, if the level 100 IOP is not good enough for the dungeon, do not invite them. You need to try to build a successful team. And if it is going to be, for example, if you're going to go do the hardest dungeon on the game, tell people, by the way guys, this is a suicide one. We're going to go for Dragon Pig. We don't have a clue how to fight it, but we're going to give it a go. And then everyone knows what deal is. Okay, how I like to recruit is simple. By the fastest person gets the place, because certain dungeons you would love to have a fire rogue on your team, but if they're going to take 30 minutes to reply and then say, oh sorry, I don't want to do the dungeon, there's no point waiting. You might as well spam your friends list, and whoever gets in, if they're strong enough. Now this is how I test if people are strong enough. For example, especially for like Excarnus and ultimate bosses, is I fight them and I skip all my turns and I say try to kill me, and I look at their damage and I see, are they strong enough for this dungeon? Are they strong enough for this ultimate boss? And if they're not, you have to say, I'm sorry, but if we take you, or I just say, sorry, it's not quite, you're not quite there, but don't worry, the second you are, I will bring you along. Because there's no point taking a level 60 NE to Vampiro dungeon. It's just not a good idea. And there's no point taking someone really weak, because they might actually feel worse than the team. You might not be that bothered if you win or lose, but them, it might be devastating that they're letting the whole team down because they suck. Okay, another thing, you could get prospecting candies for everyone. I'll link a video, Gapperman shows you how to get them. Okay, go into the dungeon. Okay, look at the left, make sure everyone has full HP. You might want to ignore them. If they're a sack, they'll get HP out of thin air. Also look to see if their HP is bugged. If they've got a number like 50-50, they're probably bugged. You might need to ask them, do you all have full HP? Okay, get the group leader to ask people, are you ready? And then count 5 people saying that they're ready. And if you can't count the 5, ask the person, the 5th person, are you ready? Okay, the group leader starts the fight. Look at the left of the screen when the fight has started, and look, and you want to count 6 crossed swords. This means everyone's in the fight. And again, if 10 seconds has gone by and one person's missing, shout their name out. Tell them to join. Okay, during the dungeon, advise people what to do, especially if they haven't been there before and there's special mechanics. Like, for example, in Iraq Mishima, you get radiation. If you run in at the start of the fight, you could get radiation 10 and die. It's happened to me. It's happened to tons of people. It's pretty funny. But that's death. That's an instant death without revive. Okay, most dungeons are pretty straightforward, and the complexity is really only on the boss. Okay, if you need to go, be right back, or AFK, clearly type it, and if possible, say for how long. For example, if I was running a mid-level dungeon and said, I need to be AFK, guys, for 20 minutes, okay? Then they might as well just wait for me on the boss, rather than sitting there saying, oh, should we do the fight, should we not do the fight? Okay, in my book, if someone sits on the ground, they are AFK or be right back. They could be cheap and trying to save on bread, because they might have only lost like 10 HP in the last fight. Now, if you do need to go AFK, after one of the floors, stay on that floor. Do not run to the next floor and then go AFK, because it looks like you want to join the fight. Now, I know that you're just making it easier for when you come back, but for someone who's organising the group, if someone ran to the next fight, it looks like they want to join the next fight. That's what it looks like. Okay, if you have one Entroff or 2 or 3 or 4, agree who is going to drop the pouch. And especially if you are fighting with an Entroff, make sure the Entroff drops a pouch. This is when they hit the boss and they smash an item out of the boss and they rob it and they get even richer. So don't just run up and kill the boss, yeah, because everyone will be shouting at you. Okay, nearing the end of the run of the dungeon, ask people, would they like to go again? Do they have stuff to do? This way you could get the people in your group or ask your friends and possibly get people to replace them straight after the run. Again, just saving on time. Always have lots of Kenko potions, because let's say someone disconnected, like the Any disconnected on the first turn and everyone died. You could then, if you had lots of Kenko, run out the dungeon, come back and revive your whole team and get the Any who disconnected and then do the fight again, and you wouldn't have to run the dungeon again. The person with the most amount of keys, or the group leader, must leave the dungeon last. Again, this is super important, because if you try to enter a dungeon while someone is already in the dungeon, you will actually just keep in the original dungeon. So you'd have just wasted your keys. So thank everyone for the group, and if they say they're not going to continue, wait till they say their goodbyes. Give them 2 or 3 minutes, and if they don't leave the group, kick them from the group, because they're stopping you from inviting people. And what lots of people, some people do, is they just sit in the group. Like I once had a guy sit in the group for 45 minutes, and you're like, are you joining? And I'm like, no, I'm not joining, I'm leveling now. And you're like, why are you still in the group? You're stopping me going on. Okay, another thing is, try to be social. It actually could be fun, and it's an aspect of an MMO. So during the dungeon, just try to have a laugh. Remember, it is only a game. Everyone makes mistakes. So try not to be too harsh on people if they messed up. For example, I have shouted at lots of people for opening the chest in the Dark Hell dungeon. Some of them had been told, some of them hadn't been told. Obviously, the ones that had been told and still opened it, you shouted at a lot. Okay, so I hope that everyone passes this video on to all their friends and they just start using this, because honestly it just makes the game so much better if you just follow this simple rules of how to do a group in a dungeon. You can apply this to ultimate bosses and lots of other stuff. Thank you. Goodbye.